Welcome to this research track session. We'll have 4 presentations. Each presenter has 20 minutes in total, so you can use that as you wish. If you can finish your formal remarks in like 12 to 15 minutes, then we'll open it up for discussion and for question and feedback, all right? And I'm gonna be your moderator. I'll be holding up signs to let you know when you have 10 minutes, 5 minutes, 1 minute, and we need to stop, all right? And so what happens after this is lunch, so we will be sticking to the time schedule very closely. First up, we have Vania from Brazil, and please introduce yourself to the audience prior to your presentation. Thank you. It works up there at the right side, unless you want to walk around.
No, it's okay.
And the clicker should be up there too.
All right. So, good morning. Can you hear me well? Yes? So, my name is Vania Carvalho Silva. I'm from Brazil. I was a homeschool mother, and when my youngest joined the university, I decided it was time for me to go back to study as well. Actually, I've been studying all the time since I was teaching her, My youngest is here today. She's taking pictures. That's Carolina. She's 26, lives in the Netherlands. She's a data scientist. And since I joined back to university in 2012, I also did my master's and I kept researching. And some of the results are in my book. It's in Portuguese. If you want to learn Portuguese, maybe it's a good place to start. And also, research must go on. So I'm going to share a little bit of my findings with you today. So I guess the title is self-explanatory. In Brazil, homeschooling has really grown over the last few decades, even though we do have now a lot of legal restrictions. So the main objective of the study is to trace the history of Brazilian homeschooling. So we need to understand homeschooling in Brazil. It's a constant debate. Now it's more known, but there is the need of the academic research and scientific data to dispel some of these myths and also for people to get to know it. My secondary objectives all has to do with the legal situation in Brazil, and also questions starting to pop up as, who are the first homeschoolers? What are they doing? So that's my ongoing research. My 2 main research questions: why is home education growing so much in Brazil despite legal opposition? And what are some of the first homeschoolers of Brazil doing today, as I said? So the methodology is bibliographic review, analysis of legal documents, and interviews with former homeschool students, which prove to be a challenge. It's not easy to track and to categorize and have a focus, but we're trying to. Why is it growing? If the country has legal restrictions, I'd say that one of the main reasons is the poor educational system in Brazil, and also the growth of strong ideology in education, which is making people to search for alternative ways of educating. Anyways, it also follows the international trends, observed in other renowned researchers, and we also traced the first homeschooling families dating from the 90s, maybe late 80s, beginning of the 90s. This is approximately 35,000 families, according to the National Association of Homeschoolers in Brazil. It's a difficult number to obtain, but ANED, which is this main association, they have most contact with the families. And the growth they say it's approximately 50%. So when did homeschooling start happening in Brazil? Two main facts that we were able to trace. Missionaries that came to Brazil, and that was the case with my family. We had contact with American, British, South African missionaries. And also there was a lot of immigration from the state of Minas Gerais into the US. And when these families returned, they brought homeschooling back to them, to Minas Gerais state, which is where the ANED, the association, was born. And the first families also that faced court cases were there in the state of Brazil. Does the Constitution of Brazil allow homeschooling? It does. It says that it's the state and the family duty to educate the children. All children have the right to education, but law in Brazil also works constitution, federal law, state law, municipality. And the federal law from 1996 says that school attendance is compulsory. So that's where we have the discrepancy and all the questions, come out. Can you not? But in 2018, a family went to the Supreme Court about a homeschool case, and the Supreme Court decided that some certain types of homeschooling were not unconstitutional. Others were. They ruled out unschooling and other forms that are not like, let's say, with some state supervision. And their decision said if there is a federal law to rule over homeschooling, then it would be legal. It would be constitutionally possible. This law has been going on for many, many years, and it was approved in one of the houses of Congress, but not in the Senate. And right now it's stopped at the Senate. It's on hold on because it's not a politically favorable moment to try to pass, in the second house of Brazil. So in spite of legal difficulties, how do we know homeschool is really growing? And then you see social media is a place where you find a lot of homeschool groups, and Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp. There are several of them. There are events taking place in Brazil openly, like Cimeduc and Expo Homeschooling, their yearly events. And also the ANED, which provides us with the data that we have as far as numbers. Families tend to remain reserved, so because of the authorities and things like that. Some of the results, so this is where I'm concentrating on, and for now, I only have what they're doing. I want to get some other categories and go a little deeper, but I'm going to read this to you because I think this is the most interesting part. So we have M, 34. She was homeschooled all her life until she joined the university at 20. Today, she has an MBA in Lindsay, Chicago with her husband, where she works as a director of e-commerce. J, 32, was homeschooled all her life until she joined the university at 18. Today, she's a software developer in Portland. She was awarded a full scholarship for her master's at Columbia University in New York City. P, 37, was homeschooled all his life. He chose not to attend university to pursue a musical career. He's a vocalist, guitarist, and composer. Besides touring internationally with his band, he is also an entrepreneur, a husband, and father of two children. C26 was homeschooled up until the 9th grade. She joined the university at 16, in which she was awarded a one-year full scholarship for study abroad program in the US. Today, she lives in Amsterdam, where she works as a data scientist and is a published writer and poet. T41 was homeschooled all his life. He works as a translator and an English teacher. He tutors students to take the TOEFL exams and is also father of two. B42 was homeschooled all her life. She studied at a Russian university while doing missionary work. She speaks 4 languages and works as a teacher. She currently lives in Canada, is married, and has 2 children. C26 was homeschooled up until the 9th grade. She graduated with a bachelor's degree in pedagogy and works as a teacher in São Paulo. She has just recently married. E39 faced learning difficulties as a child and was homeschooled all his life. He speaks 3 languages and works as a tour guide. He has 3 children. And what are the main challenges in Brazil for homeschoolers today? Definitely the legal situation. You know, we have about 5,000 families that have faced authorities at their door. Sometimes these become legal cases and court cases, even some threats to remove the children from their parents, although this has never happened in Brazil. And it's an interesting situation because Brazil ranks really poor in the educational tests, PISA tests, and other, slipped the word, sorry. We have political disputes, really strong political disputes in Brazil right now. I guess in other parts of the world, but it's kind of growing. And the main problem is that it leaves Brazilian homeschool families under judicial insecurity, facing authorities at their homes and many times being sentenced. So if the kids don't do well, if the court finds, they are sentenced to go back to school, which is kind of funny. And the research, what do we find? So here I collect a few arguments against and also in favor. We're going to find the socialization, which is a very common one. And in Brazil, we have this Paulo Freire educational thing about have to educate for citizenship. We're talking about a country that has a very big gap, social gap, so that is a question, this term. And also reinforce of elitism that has to do with the social gap. But one of the main arguments against that's been coming up more and more is child abuse. They say that the school is the main institution that protects children against child abuse. And we don't have a lot of data on that to really, offer arguments and offer a sound debate, but that's what's being said. The counter-arguments and favor arguments, then, of course, the right of the family to choose how to educate children. It's even in our constitution. As I said, the poor quality of Brazilian education, bullying, violence, drugs, and all these things that we know, and us families who have homeschooled their families, it's a big thing for us. Brazil signs quite a few documents that say that the family should be the main institution in charge of the education of their children, but the fact is that Brazil has a strong state-based political and laws, and it's very centralized in the federal government. Although we are a republic, the states have certain independence. In fact, it doesn't. So the states approved laws for homeschooling, and then they canceled those laws because no, it has to be a federal law. Oops, sorry. Socialization is not a problem for homeschool children. There's a lot of research and data to prove that. Here I cite some of them: Wyatt, Kuzman, Ray. And the results so far, Brazilian authorities tend to lean heavily on the state. And freedom to educate is understood in Brazil as freedom of school. Oh, but you can send a child to private school or to a Christian school or to this and that school. It's not understood as something other than that or out of the box. Recently, a great emphasis has been given to regularize the practice, but that is the problems that we are facing right now. So the law that was approved in the House of Deputies is stopped at Senate. It also identifies political institutions that defend the state as a supreme rule on education. We have people who say that children belong to the state. And it's funny because for some people that it's normal. So we do have a tendency to think like that. Homeschoolers' research so far are accomplished in their fields and participating citizens in society. I want to expand that. I want to expand the categories and have a more broad data about these homeschooled students, but so far that's what I have for you. At the moment, Brazilian homeschool is still happening as an underground movement while it awaits the approval rejection or rejection of a law on the subject. We don't want the rejection, so it's better to be on hold. A few quotations. I'll read this last two ones for you. At school, education has become so naturalized that it has become normal to equal education with school attendance. Moreira, he's not with us this time, but that's like the main thought in Brazil. Homeschooling is based on a philosophy of a free society and the promotion of parental choice from Friedman, which is one of the theory that I use for my research. References. This is my contact. Thank you very much. If anybody has any questions.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Vania. Very interesting. What comments or questions? Thank you.
I'm sorry, I missed the first few minutes. How are you going to get your respondents, and what kind of success do you think you will have for your surveys,
As far as the homeschoolers? Yeah. Well, we have to go to social media, to people that you know, your network of contacts, even some old friends, and especially for the older generation. For the newer generation, somehow I can get an ad's help, but it's not all the families are really open for that. So that's what the challenges are. So I got this small group of maybe, I shared with you maybe 15 so far. I'd like to get at least 50 from the first generation of homeschoolers in Brazil. So I'm working towards that.
Thank you. Yes, you're getting your, Dr. Ray is following up with a NED is not being cooperative or in giving you data, or is it the families themselves who are
No, the
reluctant?
families themselves. ANED is very cooperative. I help ANED, I give counselors sometimes to families. They ask me, oh, Vania, can you help such and such a family? Not on legal matters, but more like curriculum matters and things like that.
I have a question, Vania. How is the political unrest in Brazil? How is that affecting families' choice about home education? Do you see it increasing or decreasing or even polarizing your community with the polarization that you're experiencing right now?
Yeah, from what we hear and from the data that we have, it is increasing. And of course, just as it happened in other places of the world with the pandemic, it became well known, more well known, let's say. The thing is, I don't want to get into the politics, but we do have people who are supportive of freedom and, families have the right to their children. On the other side, which is very strong in Brazil, as far as especially academia, I think that school is so important. Children need to be in school, to be in contact with different groups, and all these arguments that some of them I cited here. It's interesting though, because in Brazil, let's say in a big city like Rio or São Paulo, the children who go to public school are the children socially and the lower classes. The rich kids, the first thing that a family when it's middle class in Brazil does is to put their kid in a private school, even in smaller cities. So children don't have contact with a lot of different children. They have contact with children of their same social standard. But we have, a strong, let's put the kids in school, let's put the kids in school for 8 or 10 hours. And people see that as good. Oh, when my child can be in school all day, then they're having a very good education. So we have quite a mentality that's prevalent in Brazil like that. And so homeschooling can be a challenging people to think outside the box and to think differently in that respect.
Thank you. Yes, it's not just Brazil,
Yeah.
but we are seeing that around the world, right? Just this assumption that the state is the caretaker for children, and anybody doing something counterculturally is to be
in
suspicious.
2018,
like, why are they doing that?
Yeah, just one interesting fact. In 2018, when we had this homeschool situation going to the Supreme Court, I had a friend, also a homeschool mother, who knew one of the judges. So we went and talked to him. And then he said, okay, I'll open the door for you to talk to the other Supreme Court judges. We talked to 4 of them and left materials to all of them. And before the trial, they said, no, this is not going to pass. But let's see, maybe we put it on hold. They didn't put it on hold. All of them voted, unfortunately, because if they had put it on hold, it would be on hold until today. But it didn't pass. They gave us this little gap, go to Congress and resolve with them. So maybe there's still hope.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Vania.
Thank you.
Excellent. Philippe?
Thank you. No, thanks to the research track and especially to Debra, because our research has been fostered by the existence of the Global Home Education Conference in France, and also because the proposal I submitted got a funding from the research track, and it will help going further in this research. I will explain how. Of course, thanks to you, because I will present something very, very preliminary, an ongoing research, so it's interesting, but it can be frustrating because you won't have robust results. And thanks also for the research participants to this research, because they, of course, home educating families were necessary to make this research, and we will need their support in the future. So the presentation is very common, so I do not have to say the outline. So just one word about home education in France as in the introduction, because I thought it would be necessary to tell that it has been long unresearched. There are not that many things, but it's changing, so I have to just to show that the figures are growing higher. But you can see that my chart figure is stopping in 2022 because there were problems with access with different data. So if you want more recent data, you can go to Liberté d'Éducation website where they found some figures to add, but they are not exactly the same way that. But in France, so it grew, and it's a bit less now since 2022, but it's not the topic of this presentation. I just wanted to say that in these figures, there are in fact 2 categories. We have home educating families in the sense that you may have in mind, but we also have some families who enroll students in public online education. That's called the CNED in France, and it belongs to this figure, so it's pretty complex, but it's not important here. Just to say that it's of course it's a small number of school-age children. In France, school is mandatory. Well, instruction is mandatory. Now we can say maybe school is mandatory between 3 and 16 years old, and you have just 0.5% of children who are home educated, including online public education. So that was the only introduction, and then I go to my topic. So it has long been unresearched, so if you want to know things about home education, you can turn to the press or to movies, or there are some stereotypes or information, of course, that circulates. And what do you see if you do not read research or people who know the topic? What do you know? How is home education depicted in France? And among others, what kind of images circulate about that? Because that's the idea, you will understand why. So first thing, if we researched press articles and many mainstream mass media papers, and you see it's always, the illustration, it's always green with the children in gardens or in parks, so it's outside. So I just give some example. So that's this image is the comment on dit l'affiche, sorry, the flyer for a very important documentary about home education in France. Very important because many families, or some families, were totally convinced thanks to this documentary. It's well known in the subculture of home education, so it's totally green, you see. And you have another fiction movie which is called Wildlife, where it's the history, a very specific history that's not representative at all. That's not the question, but it's a movie dealing with home educating families. And I gave you another example that can be interesting for you. So you know maybe this movie about a home educator, Captain Fantastic, and see the French flyer. It's very different. It's more green. You have some forest. So it's a very kind of stereotypes. So then you have, when you read about home education in France, you hear about religion, about radicalization, Islamism, Islamist separatism, but in a visual terms, it's not that easy to illustrate. So I have no pictures to show, except you have some sign of the Republic that's come. If it deals with home education, you can see Republic signs coming. And then, if you have you read the press about home education, you have, especially in the 2 last years, for political reason, you have many social demos. You have social contests because there were a law there were a controversy in France about home education bill, and there were some demonstration, and the local press, especially, really circulated the idea that parents were motivated to protect their right to home educate. So in visual terms, these are some of the most common stereotypes you can see. If we consider the parent literature about home education, we can also see that there is a way to depict home education in a way that corresponds the way to present home education. So you know this divide between school at home and unschooling. So we can see this also in visual terms. So you have a handbook for parents called Faire l'école à la maison, doing school at home, so home educating, and you see you have books, you have someone a student studying, but it's green also. And you have another book that we have here, the author, so I'm honored to have chosen the right picture. And you see there is a blackboard, so there are some way to see home education with some school ways to consider education. And there are other books who make other points. So here, this is the translation of John Holt's How Children Fail, and they chose to depict a kind of school image, but you see in a very bad way, because you have a student who is just sleeping on the paper. And then How Children Learn, from the same editor. it's published with something where you can read books and some school material, we could say, but outside. And then if you go further and you see books about home education with more informal ways to consider education, you have children playing, so it's not school anymore, would say. So it's a schematic, because in French primary school they also play. And then learning without school, and then, so it's green, it's outside. And this unschooling book, you have a group of people, so they do not seem to have any school material, they are together. And that's something that we meet later. So in France, our research mainly focused on adults. So we had a big project in the 4 to 5 last years. We had a big conference. This will be a big book. I hope it will be published soon in this year. And in English speaking, so I meant we focused on adults, and we had absolutely nothing about what school-age children who are home educating think and tell about their situation. So in English-speaking research, we have pieces, of course. For instance, we have an article in the Home Education Researcher in 1996, just an example. You have a review of the literature in Neumann and Gutermann, who in an article they mentioned yesterday about students' metaphors. And there's also a research beginning by Flack and Smith, researching home educated kids with pictures and photos, as we will do. Okay, so the question is now, is it worth researching home educated kids' point of view? I will just give an example of the reason why we think it would be worth. If we talk about motivations, you know that in home education research, motivations are the main topic. So usually people say, and also in the press and the common public, what are reasons for homeschooling, but they do not mention that. But in fact, they have in mind what are parental reasons for homeschooling. And so it's adult frame, it's adult-centric, maybe adult-centrist. And if we say, okay, let's ask the children, we will have other question raising. So do they have in mind some intentions? Do they give some reasons? Is it different from the parents? So the idea is to have a way to frame another way the questions. And you see, if we do something child-centric, we can face the same problem that with adults, because we can forget that children and parents interact. So it is interesting to think that maybe we should face the problem in a relational way. That is to say, how within the family group, and with the environment, how the decision on the motives to home educator arise. And we can see in a relational way. So that was just to illustrate how it could be interesting to dive into a youngster's point of view, instead of just forgetting that we are dealing only with adults or only with children. So we could do that with the same way with other usual topics. So what we have done, the question was, how can we research home educated kids' point of view? And we had the idea to organize a photo workshop with some kids, just to talk about home education with them. So it was an opportunity raised by the fact that I met a professional photographer who had an own personal artistic project about home education. This is Camille Nivolet that you can see here. She published her first work about time without school, about teenagers who are homeschooled. So she made many pictures, and she made many green pictures. And when we met, she said, "Oh, indeed, my pictures are green." So it was interesting to interact. So we met, and we had the idea to invite youngsters to participate in a photo workshop that she would supervise, so they can work. So prior to the meeting, participants get some assignments. So it's in English here. We give them, we have to meet, for instance, on a Friday, and we say just 3 days before, take a picture at this delimited schedule so we can see what you're doing. And they bring the picture and we talk about it. And then they had other assignments that you can read. The bold signs are more important. Take a picture of you while learning. Take a picture that illustrates your home education. They bring the picture and we talk about that. They explain why they have done that. And during the workshop, there are other photo exercises, because it's a photo workshop, to learn how to photograph, to take pictures. So the photograph Camille brings many small photo cameras with. And you can see that's an exercise when the teenagers had to make pictures of an object they wanted to bring with them. And then they have discussion and we talk, and we've done 2 workshops like this with 8 and 6 teenagers, and you see we talk about the pictures they brought or that they have taken, and Camille is the main supervisor of the thing. And so the interest, it's a way to offer a gift to participants, because we always have the question of how is it interesting for participants to participate our research, and as compared with an interview where we want interviewees just to give us time. Here we offer a free photo workshop, so it's interesting. We think for these teenagers to interact with a professional photographer, and we get data, and we think it's balanced, because there is something to win for them too. So in an ethical way, we find it an interesting way. I just wanted to say, because it's an ongoing process, and if people are interested about this methodology, that is very demanding to organize, because you need to have call for participation, to find time with people, with the photograph, with the academic. You have to call every parent. You have to get consent forms, of course, and explain them and use them. And you have to send reminders to gather everything, to debrief with parents, and so on. Okay, you can collect many data with this, because you have the pictures selected or taken by the youngsters, or you have discussions that we can record and use. It's like a focus group during the workshop. You can also see what is happening during the workshop, because you can see how these youngsters are learning. So it's very interesting, I would say how. And you have interactions with the parents, so you can know the family context and the demographics and so on. And well, it's interesting. So we had 2 workshops. So it's a few, so it's just a beginning. One was more, well, okay. I have 5 minutes left, I know. The theoretical framework, I will go very fast. So you have 2 main literature origins: the sociology of childhood. So I would not develop that, but the idea is to say that children are not transparent, and we have to take them into account, because they got a kind of agency. There are real stakeholders in the process, but that's maybe intuitional. And this is a visual sociology perspective, so I won't develop that, but you have many ways to explain how is it interesting to use pictures to make research. I just wanted to add, that's the last sentence, that there is no aesthetical intention in this study. So the professional photographer she just helps to do that, but her work is not done. That's not artistic work that we are doing. Well, I'm just going through that. So just because I have 3 remaining minutes, sorry, I won't have maybe the time for questions and answers, but it's ongoing, so we can talk about it after, or I hope I will present more robust results in the future. Just wanted to illustrate how it might be interesting. So if we see with all the material how it is to learn in home education, what appears is this. For instance, mainly that you have school materials, and it seems school, or you also have computers, you also have paintings, but in the way that youngsters took pictures of what they were doing on the previous Monday at a time when other children were schooled, and when they took pictures of what was learning for them, or what was an image that they had at home showing what home education is. I won't explain why, but the school and very common way to depict knowledge and learning for school-age children is here. I mean, we have the same kind of visual ways that I depicted at the beginning with these school-at-home books, you know? So when they took pictures of them while learning, you had these pictures. So you see the two of them there. They could be not in a school, but it's very formal, and it's very interesting because these two of them in the second workshop, they were taken by families who depict themselves as informal learners. So we had the feeling that they could be not a divide, because it's more subtle than that, but when we ask children to show what is learning or to explain what comes first, mainly, not exclusively, but these are very typical ways to understand learning, even for unschooled people. So that's an example of one child who explained that. So images of home learning, they remain mainly conventional. So the question is why? So maybe we should separate between the way they learn, they have practices, the way they perceive the way they learn, and the idea they get of it, and the way they visualize that, because maybe there are some gaps between these different dimensions, and maybe the students or the school-at-home kids, they want to show that they learn the conventional ways because they want to convince that they are doing just the way it is. So maybe there is this kind of thing. I know, 1 minute. So we just go away. Just to mention other recurring themes coming when they talk about their home education. It's outdoor, it's just referring to what I presented at the beginning with the green visuals, and outside is very important. Then friends were very important, and then there are pictures, fun with the pictures, or during the workshop, it was very relaxed, and they learned during the workshop with fun. And also sometimes the way to be regulated by the states or other was important for them in their home educating experience. There are many limits, you can see, but my time is over. Just wanted to say that it would be great if we had the opportunity to try that in another country than France. So I had in mind, of course, the UK. And this is the literature. And I thank you for your attention. I'm sorry to have taken the 20 minutes just for the presentation.
Oh, you're doing fine. That was absolutely fascinating, Philippe. We have time for a question? Yes, please.
Yes, I work a lot with informal learners and unschoolers, and I also have the experience that they do not identify what they do as learning.
Okay.
When they write down, for us, they write down their activities, and sometimes when they come to us in the beginning, they do not write down anything. And then they say, maybe I didn't do anything. But when you ask them, what are you doing? Then it comes, when you ask, what are you learning? They do not identify that. It has no value for them in their thinking in the beginning, that they were just cooking or watching a video or something. So what do you think about that? Just asking, take a photo about what you're doing and not what you are learning.
No, I'm very happy to have this confirmation. So maybe the assignments should be rethought for that, but it's depending on if we want to focus on that now. Because this question, the fact that children might not conceptualize or theorize the way they learn at home is different as compared with what parent thinks and what parent advocates put forward just to say that there are specificities and so on. That's a question that was raised thanks to that. For you, it's your own experience, but it was for me, it's a result of these two first workshops, and I find it very interesting also. So thanks.
I would ditto what she said. I mean, same comment. They don't know. And then you just said sometimes what the parents express might be different from what the children know. And maybe another piece of your study, or maybe you're doing it, or somebody else could do it. To what extent do parents convey and transmit to their children why and what they do in raising their children? And I think there's sometimes a big gap, and I've noticed that just through experience all across America.
Yeah, it would be great. Thanks for the suggestion.
Thank you very much, Philippe. Trevor? Thank you. Dr. Lee, joining us from Hong Kong. If we were giving away awards for the furthest travel. Is the clicker up there? Pardon? It's that one open? Or you want to walk away?
Yeah, maybe
Okay.
just to give me a week because I have a little bit jet lag. Sentence. Okay. So good morning, everyone. My name is Trevor. I'm from Hong Kong, and I'm very happy to be here to share. There's some echo, right? It's okay, right? Okay. So I'm going to share my recent research about a growing phenomenon of Chinese homeschooling. All right, and the main focus is it's just like many other homeschooling research. Philippe just said the focus is on parents. Okay, the parents' view and their motivations, their approaches, and I'm going to share a little bit about my ongoing follow-up studies too about overtime changes in their beliefs and practices. Okay, so so the aim, okay, I have to tell, in this presentation, my aim is to give you a very quick overview of Chinese homeschooling, because I noticed that there's no one, looks like from my country. So I want to tell you a little bit about the Chinese homeschooling, okay, for today. So first of all, because since there's no one from my country, so I can say whatever I want about my Chinese education, all right? So of course, there are some stereotype or, I know. If for foreigners, most time in recent years, they would, I ask them, what do you think about Chinese education or parenting? Of course, tiger mom. And I partly agree. And traditionally, probably influenced by Confucianism, Chinese families focus both parental control and parental love for their children's education. But at the same time, they really highly value education, especially school credential, examination, hard work, diligence, sacrifice, and so on and so forth. So this is the traditional historical background, okay, historical background. But all of a sudden now we come back to today, okay? With recent generational shifts, okay, Chinese families, or at least urban Chinese families nowadays, change a lot, okay? So, you can see many more families would choose alternative educational pathways for their children's education. And one of the ways is definitely homeschooling, okay? So that's why, I just extract one recent news about Chinese homeschooling. And although I have to emphasize, the phenomenon is growing, but it's still a very small group in China, because in the mainland China, homeschooling is still not legal, all right? And I want to show you this map, because again, I assume you may not know much about China, okay? So this is obviously when you talk about China, is mainland China, all right? But my research is, I picked two research sites for this research, okay? One is Hong Kong and another is Taipei. I'm not going through all those geopolitical issues here because it's too complicated. But I want to explain, yeah. By the way, Chinese homeschooling is extremely under research, okay? At least in English language, you cannot find much to talk about this. And yeah, and these two cities is cities, okay, not in a rural area, okay? These the big cities. And I intentionally picked these two sites, and I'm going to explain it. These two, well, basically this project is a multi-site qualitative research. And I picked Hong Kong and Taipei because there are a lot of commonalities and differences. And yeah, for example, both cities are highly developed market economy. We share similar Chinese traditions. We use traditional Chinese characters. We both emphasize exam-oriented school system and blah, blah. And I want to draw your attention here, okay, at the last point. The main difference between these two cities is in Hong Kong, homeschooling is not legal, while Taipei legalized homeschooling since 1999. So in my region, you can say Taiwan has been the pioneer of Chinese homeschooling movements, because like after 20 years effort, more than 20 years actually, homeschooling is actually embedded in their educational system. For example, like under this, like part of non-school-based experiential education, like non-school educational models within this big, larger umbrella. There are a lot of different models, and one of it is homeschooling. So I think it's very interesting to compare these two cities. Their experience, one is not legal and one is legal. And why I don't say illegal, because Hong Kong families still can find a way to navigate the legal loopholes and things like that. So that's why, yeah, the government didn't say it's illegal. But yeah, anyway, it's very complicated. And for the theoretical part, I actually want to look at the contemporary Chinese parenthood, okay, through the case of homeschooling. So, because my background is sociology, and actually there are some discussions about contemporary Chinese parenthood. For example, this book called Raising Global Families, written by a Taiwanese scholar, Lan Peijia. And we saw a trend in the contemporary Chinese society, more and more, especially middle-class families, the well-off families, they change the way to raise their children. They no longer focus on just the local context, but they want to raise their kid to be a global citizens, for example. They want to raise their kid to be more global competitive. So that's why more and more families want to choose alternative educational pathways for their children. So to me, theoretically, homeschooling is more or less like an expression of parental agency. It's like an educational choice to reflect several features of Chinese education or parenting. For example, like homeschooling reflect like a typical style of Chinese authoritarian parenting. For example, like Confucian emphasis on parental authority, intensive intervention, and parental sacrifice. And it's also a very typical example nowadays of privatized education that operates without markets. For example, like nowadays, better off families like to choose alternative educational models to escape or bypass the local education system, school system. Because, I'm not sure whether you know, the Chinese school system is very competitive. They rely on a very high stake examination system, right? So these better off families, they want to just walk around. They don't want their children to suffer, but then they also want their children to go to the university. So that's why maybe homeschooling is one way for them to do so. And lastly, and very obviously, the homeschooling is also a big exception to the Chinese culture in which parents value school highly. specifically, they value the credentials highly. They really need the certificate and all those things. But then homeschooling, they don't guarantee all these things. So that's why all these things driven me to do the following research. Okay. Again, this backdrop, I asked for the following questions. How do Chinese parents explain their decisions to homeschool their children, and what are these parents' values and orientations to education, and what are their homeschooling practices? I have in this research there are a lot of different findings, but for today, again, I just want to give you some snapshots of Chinese homeschooling. So let's focus on the. Okay, before I talk about the findings, let me very quickly talk about the cases. Okay, all right. So to answer these questions, I interviewed 31 families in both cities, and as you can tell in this slide, these parents are highly educated. Most of them are professionals or entrepreneurs, and their incomes are basically above the average. And the cases also cover a wide range of homeschooling experiences. On average, the children had been homeschooled for 4 to 5 years. And here are the findings. Okay, very quickly. I just want to organize the findings into 4 thematic questions to give you a general sense of what they're doing, what they're thinking. Okay, so again, why? Why did they choose to homeschool? How did they organize homeschooling? Who engaged in homeschooling? And what did they do during homeschooling? So just give you a heads up. Maybe for homeschooling people here, all these are just common sense. But yeah, just think about the context. It's a big step for Chinese families to change their way to educate their students. Okay, their children. Sorry, their children. Yeah. So first of all, why homeschool? Okay, so basically, most of the participants told me that they were dissatisfied with mainstream schools, and secondly, they also some of the participants prefer non-traditional education models. They basically shared with me like some families want to pursue Montessori models, Waldorf models, Sudbury models, and so on and so forth. And some other cases also have some other personal issues. And in terms of the pedagogic organization, I try to map their typical homeschool activities onto this spectrum between structured and unstructured learning approaches regarding processes and content. So as you can see, slightly more than a half of the participants or the families, the cases, were inclined to structured end of the spectrum. So it may also, again, reflect the Chinese context. They change a lot, but still like in the middle, like they still like all those structure things. And who it was involved in their homeschooling journey, and 100% sure, the family always put the child at the middle in the family in their homeschooling journey. But then instead of, okay, traditionally they focus on student-teacher dietic relations. The families told me that, okay, they want the kid to interact with multiple actors in their learning journey. So that's why you can see, for example, here there are some groups like homeschool support groups, peer groups, private educational groups, families, and then, yeah, tradition school too. Okay, so it's more like a conventional, it's always the conventional and alternative ways, like a combination. And finally, what they did, okay, most families, or all families actually, they aim to provide their kid a well-rounded education. And actually, this is something new to Chinese education, okay? Not really very new thing, but it is not many parents really understand why, yeah, because most of the time, again, they focus on academic rigor, right? But then I guess this is a way to show the change that I just mentioned a few minutes ago, right? But then again, you can still see they are in between the traditional way of education and or conventional way of education and the new ways. For example, you can still see some groups would use conventional classroom setting. They still ask the student to do the worksheets, like the drilling, the pre-packaged curriculum, and so on and so forth. But at the same time, they also would do, for example, organize field trips, provide different types of readings, online learning, and also everyday life lessons. They, for example, like learning through living. So it's again a mix of activities, and but the spirit is very clear. They want to provide the kids the things that the kid are interested to learn. So it's still like a child-centered learning approach. It's a big paradigm shift, I would say, compared to the traditional mode of Chinese education. So that's it for the main part of my research, okay, that I conducted 3 years ago in 2021. And then this year, like 2 months ago, I started another follow-up studies. I basically reapproach these families and then see what happened now for them, like any change happened. So yeah, still ongoing. I have to say there's some updates, but I didn't manage to really interview all of them. I just interviewed a few. Yeah, I'm okay, dude. No worries. I can stop anytime. All right. So basically, I didn't manage to talk to the children because this follow-up study, I want to talk to the bigger students, the older student, the older children now, because I want to talk about like after these years, how they think about their homeschooling journey, and especially when they transition to further education or work. Okay, but other than the children, I really want to talk about interview the parents. Okay, so here's the preliminary findings, the second last slide. So no worries. The main finding is the families in both cities show flexibility in children's education over time, switching between school and homeschool models or countries of study based on changing needs and opportunities. So for example, several Hong Kong families have since relocated internationally, with children now enrolled in schools in UK, Canada, the Netherlands, and so on and so forth. Educational arrangements for Hong Kong families include a mix of public and private schools, homeschooling, world schooling through international travel. And comparatively, Taipei families are more locally oriented, but still, they show a variety of schooling options, including mainstream public and private schools, experiential schools, homeschool individually or as part of a co-op, okay? And so far up to this moment, I found that at least 2 children are already working, but they made a very successful transition to work. And maybe soon I will try to arrange an interview with these children. Okay, so basically these examples show diversified pathways for the children's learning. So this is the updates about the follow-up studies, and let's go to the concluding remarks. Okay, yeah, concluding remarks. No worries. So this is the last line. Okay, very quickly, because I'm from the education department, right? So my regular audience is the government, the education officials, the school petitioners, of course, not homeschoolers. So that's why, based on this research result, the main findings, I try to convince the government homeschooling can be a significant source of inspiration for school innovations. So basically through the research, dissemination, workshop, talk, presentation, to talk about for example, like hybrid model, whether we can reduce the school days and then more time free for the kid to stay at home to study and blah, blah. So yeah, one contribution of this, my project is about this. And another is more about theoretical thing that I'm not sure whether you are very interested in. But yeah, very quickly, as I said, theoretically, I want to look at the contemporary Chinese parenthood. So one of the findings shows actually the very complicated dynamics of the reflexive parenthood. For example, like Chinese parents need to struggle with the traditional values versus the new global values. For example, like happiness versus drilling, sacrifice, creativities versus drilling, blah, blah, blah. So these things are really, I think, a very interesting example to illustrate all these process of reflexive parenthood. Okay, all right. If you are interested in my research, you can go to the references, and here are I just published some articles in the international journals. So maybe you're interested to take a look. All right, so that's it for my research. Thank you. Yep. So any questions? So, but just one. Sorry, I hijacked the microphone.
Yes, we have time for a couple questions. Yes.
Is it possible to count how many students are homeschooled there?
In Taipei, yes, because it's legal. It's very well developed. Let me think. I think in few years ago, if I'm not wrong, it's about 6,000 homeschool children registered in the government system. But of course, there are some not registered. But in Hong Kong, you never know because it's always underground. And it's interesting, but the government say it's not legal. But I think once I saw the news, the government said there's a few cases. But obviously, you can tell it's more than a few cases because my cases more than few cases, right? So I guess it's hundreds. In Hong Kong, it's hundreds. They are very difficult. They have to remain undetected, So yeah, that's.
Hi, thank you for your presentation. I'm curious, do the Chinese public have this strong perception of the educational method of homeschooling being very tied to religious fundamentalism, as it maybe is in the West? And if so, how does that influence adoption or acceptance?
Yeah, I think that's very interesting, very important questions, actually. From starting this project, people already keep asking me this. And interestingly, I'm not talking about the mainland China again. Okay, mainland China is very diverse. It's huge, so I'm not going to talk about this. But in Hong Kong, it's quite a middle-class phenomenon, which I could quite clear to say is not quite faith-based. Most of the time, it's just really an educational option. So I can say I never heard any debate about the religious or the faith-based things. So yeah, it's a different story, at least in Hong Kong.
Thank you very much. Fascinating, amazing stuff. Two quick questions. The first one, was there, as far as you know, any legacy of homeschooling in Hong Kong from prior to 1997? Was it more accepted, and maybe there was or is this a brand new phenomenon and it was just as illegal prior to 97? And then second question is, did you see any differences in the reasons for homeschooling between Hong Kong and Taipei? Like some trends where you could look and say, oh, that's definitely a Hong Kong family answering this way, and this is a Taipei family.
Yeah, great. Two very important questions. So the first one, I guess, if we talk about colonial legacy, right? I would say before 1997, the main homeschooling population, I guess, because again, no research at all, really. Even like the reporter, because I said my research dissemination, right? The reporter come to me and say, Trevor, I cannot find even one single research report talking about homeschooling so far. But as far as I know, it's mainly about the expat families, because the government always they just keep a close eye to the expat families. So maybe before 1997, mainly expat. But nowadays, I can tell really a big difference. And the local families are more voiced out about their educational concerns, and homeschooling concern. And by the way, this big project is sponsored by the government, Hong Kong government. So I guess it's okay to talk about, at least in the public, about the homeschooling. So it's not an issue. But concerning this, as for the second questions, one notable difference between Taiwanese families and Hong Kong family is, since Taipei is homeschooling is legalized, so families feel more comfortable working with the local schools. They can they can send the kid to join the inter-school competition, for example, and blah, blah, blah. But in Hong Kong, the families are really relying on themselves. And that's why if you keep talking about them, because one of the goal of my research is about the parental values, right? So in Hong Kong families, parents may focus more on the developing their kids' self-direction, the self-concepts. Versus you can tell the Taiwanese families, the parents would focus more on the civic responsibilities, the citizenship, and blah, blah, blah. Even though they're doing the homeschooling, people may think it's very individualized. But yeah, for Taiwanese, they focus on other things.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Yes. Fascinating. Gabriela. Thank you. And now we'll hear from Poland.
Okay. I'm Gabriela Letnovska and I'm from Poland. I represent Home Education Foundation and I want to present you our research report on the motivation for choosing home education in Poland. First of all, I will tell you who we are and then show you a little background about the increasing number of homeschool students in Poland in recent years. Who are we? The Home Education Foundation has been supporting home education in Poland for the past 7 years. Our mission is to foster and advance this form of learning by bringing together parents, schools, and policymakers in open dialogue, and by promoting personalized development path for each child. Our vision in Poland is a future where education in all of its forms is seen not only as a choice, but as a valuable opportunity for growth that aligns with the individual needs of children. We strive to ensure that home education is not marginalized and that students who pursue it are recognized, respected, and well supported. A quick view about home education in Poland. We have regulated home education in Poland. By education law, every child can be homeschooled. Parents can obtain the consent of the principal of the school in each school in Poland, both public and private. But they have to submit statement of providing conditions that ensure the implementation of the curriculum and commitment from the parents for the child to take classification exams. We have in Poland friendly schools, friendly to home education, as you said, and umbrella schools. We noticed in recent years the increasingly number of homeschooled students. A significant finding from our report is the dynamically increasing number of homeschooled students since 2021. Where there were almost 20,000 children and young people. In 2022, there were more than 30,000, and in 2023, more than 40,000. This means that over 3 years, the number of students in homeschooling in Poland increased by more than 100%. In September 2023, the new school year was started by 4.66 million students in all forms of education, which means that the number of children and young people in homeschooling first in our history in Poland exceeded 1% of the total. According to the latest data, nearly 54,000 students in Poland are in home education. We've seen what caused that. First of all, there were the impact of pandemic. The first moment of dynamic increase in the analyzed number was the pandemic period. Comparing it at the beginning of the pandemic in June 2020, there were a little more than 10,000 of homeschooled students, while in September the same year, 73% more, namely 20,000. The growth and dynamics did not change significantly also at the end and after the pandemic, and continued to rise after its ending. As we observed by the Home Education Foundation, the main reason could be dissatisfaction with the quality of remote learning, as it was noticed that there are tools developed over the years that effectively combined independent learning with online education. Other reasons include fear of the pandemic threat, and then a greater awareness of alternative educational solutions. Also, political actions in 2022 related to the so-called Lex Czarnek 2.0, that is, the bill that aimed to significantly limit the possibilities of homeschooling, also contributed to the dynamically growing number of students in homeschooling. Political disputes and community engagement meant that the topic of homeschooling was loudly discussed in the media. This caused great interests among Poles, including those who were not previously interested in this form of education or did not know about it at all. The scale of dissatisfaction with the attempt to limit homeschooling grew to such an extent that the diverse homeschooling environment united. This was manifested in protests in front of the Sejm of the Republic of Poland building or in social media campaigns. As a result, the bill was vetoed by the President of Poland. We also notice that there are more secondary school students in home education than in primary school students. During this period, growing interest in this form of education was also shown by students of secondary schools. While in 2021, they constituted 20.6% of all students in homeschooling, by May 2023, it was shown that they nearly make up half. The 2023-2024 school year was unique on national scale. As in January, for the first time, as in September, for the first time in history, the number of students in this mode of education in secondary schools exceeded that of primary students, with 54.4% of students in homeschooled being high school students. Now I'd like you to present our research report on the motivation for choosing home education. We had 3 research objectives: understanding the motives and reasons for families choosing home education, identifying the key factors influencing the decision to choose home education, and analyzing the benefits and challenges associated with home education. Together with the Pragma Psychological Science Club operating at the Institute of Applied Psychology at Jagiellonian University, we began a quantitative study of the reasons why more and more Poles decide on homeschooling. For this purpose, we prepared an original online questionnaire with a predominance of closed questions developed based on a previously prepared pilot study. The target group of the questionnaire were parents of homeschooled children and young people throughout Poland. Among the questions were not only the assessment of the importance of motives in the decision to undertake homeschooling, but also socioeconomic and location conditions. In our research participated 464 people, parents. The vast majority of the survey forms were completed by women, more than 80%. Men counted for a little more than 13%. 2 individuals selected others, and 7 did not wish to respond. The largest group of participants in the study were residents of rural areas and cities with populations over 500,000. And this results reflects the nationwide distribution of children being educated at home. The overwhelming majority of respondents have higher education, which is almost 80%. Which is significantly higher than the national data from the 2021 of national census, which constituted almost 46% with a higher education. We also asked about their occupation in the field. Respondents were asked to write it in themselves, resulting in a wide range of responses. The most frequently mentioned categories include teachers, 66 people, self-employed individuals, 36, medical professions, for example, nurses, doctors, 16 people, psychologists, 12, and HR and accounting specialists, 15 people. And the last group consists of non-working individuals, 77 people. But this shows that the vast majority of home educating parents who participated in the study are actually working, which constitutes 83.4%. Number of children in home education. The vast majority of respondents have 1 child in home education, which is more than 60%. As many as almost 68% of parents indicated that their children, all children, are in home education. This means that a significant portion of respondents adjust the form of education to the needs of each child. And the most important part, among the motives, For transitioning to home education, the most important turned out to be dissatisfaction with the traditional education system. For nearly 3/4 of respondents, this was a very significant motive. The next motives were the child's individual educational needs, problems with the child's peers or teachers, and the child's health condition. The least important motive was the family lifestyle, for example, frequent travel, which was very significant only for 83 respondents. Among the problems in conventional education, the most important for respondents is the lack of individual approach to the students, which is a very significant problem for almost 300 respondents. Next, respondents highlighted the excessive focus on grades, the overloaded curriculum, and incompetent teaching staff. The least important among the 5 problems considered in the questionnaire was peer conflicts and bullying, which was very significant only for 185% people. Among the highlighted problems of home education, and because we also asked about that, the highest score was given to the lack of state support for this form of education, which is a very significant problem for 221 respondents. The next issues, though with significantly lower averages, are the responsibility for the child's education resting entirely on parents or guardians, or stigmatization or lack of social acceptance for this type of education, and following the same core curriculum as in traditional conventional schools. The least important problem of home education was identified as the lack of contact with peers. Who could guess? We also asked about how many hours a day does the child spend on learning. As you can see, in grades 1st through 3 of primary school, the most frequently chosen option was 1 to 2 hours, similar to grades 4 through 6. In grades 7 and 8, the responses are more varied, with the most common being 2 or 3 hours and 4 to 5 hours. In secondary school, it is 3 to 4 hours of learning per day. Only respondents with 1 child in home education were asked about that. As you can see, it's less than in conventional school. Considering the daily time spent with the child, excluding learning, the responses are quite different. The largest group consists of parents who spend more than 7 hours per day with the children. The remaining responses range from up to 1 hour per day, which is only 5.6%, and 2 to 3 hours per day, which is almost 13%. And the last part I want to show you, it's an average number of hours a student in home education dedicates weekly to developing interests and passions. Similarly, regarding the weekly time dedicated to developing interests and passions, the most frequently selected options was the one indicating the largest amount of time. More than 8 hours per week are dedicated to developing interests and passions by almost 40% of the respondents' children. And the least represented group are children who do not spend any time on developing interests, which is less than 2%. And those who spend up to 2 hours per week on these activities. In conclusions, we have the main motivators for choosing home educations, which are the lack of individual approach and excessive focus on grades in traditional schools. Then homeschoolers spend less time studying, but spend a lot of time with their parents and developing their passions. And the last one, parents consider the lack of support from the state and stigmatization from society to be the main disadvantages of home education. Thank you very much.
Gabriela, we have time for a couple questions. I'd like to get us started. All right, Bill?
Thank you, Gabriela. That was fascinating and encouraging, actually, after some of the other reports. Dissatisfaction with the local school system. In the United States, there's a lot of dissatisfaction with curricula that's being taught, but I didn't see, is that an aspect of that dissatisfaction, like specific things that is making its way into the curricula in Poland?
It's less problem than the dissatisfaction with working with a school. Actually, in Poland, a lot of parents are not satisfied with the school, with the contact with the parents, with the, teachers, and about the bullying, etc. And in Poland, we also have a strong connection with the curriculum, with compulsory education, and that's why we choose dissatisfaction of school at all.
I have a quick final question. What were your theories about the big jump in secondary students being homeschooled?
Actually, there were, first of all, pandemic, where more people have known about home education. And also we have a phenomenon with one school in Poland, which provide home education support to high school students. Few years ago, there were a little number of high school with home education support. So when this school opened for secondary school students, it grown up.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Gabriela.
Thank you.
I think this is one of the first studies of its kind coming out of Poland, so you're groundbreaking there. Thank you, everybody.